Hello, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, an Israeli woman is tragically killed in a terror attack in Istanbul. Prime Minister Netanyahu gets an invite to President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration, and ILTV helps welcome a flock of holy sheep to the Holy Land. I'm Natasha Kirchek here with the latest news in Israel. Instead of joy, the new year began with terror for four Israeli girlfriends celebrating the start of 2017 at an Istanbul nightclub. One was killed and another was moderately wounded when at least one gunman opened fire with a long-barreled weapon. Just a short time ago, 18-year-old Israeli Lian Zaher Nasser was confirmed to have been killed during the attack. Earlier today, she'd been reported missing, but now her body has been identified as one of the 39 people murdered during a shooting spree in the city's Ortaköy district, around 1:45 this morning. Her 18-and-a-half-year-old friend from the Arab city of Tira is currently listed in moderate condition, after undergoing surgery for injuries to her hand and her foot. Another Israeli woman suffered shock, and the fourth was uninjured. Much still remains unknown at this point, and no group has yet claimed responsibility. 68 others were also hurt in the shooting spree, which some survivors say was carried out by either one or two gunmen dressed in Santa costumes and speaking Arabic. A manhunt for the perpetrators is underway. In 2016, Turkey was hit by more terror attacks than any other year in its history, all of which are being blamed on Kurdish separatists or Islamic State jihadists. Meanwhile, Israel's anti-terrorism directorate has issued a travel advisory cautioning citizens against going to India right now. According to the statement, there is an immediate threat of attack to Western and other tourist targets, particularly in southwest India. The agency is stressing that a particular emphasis should be put on events in the coming days in connection with beach and club parties celebrating the new year at any locations where there's a high concentration of visitors. The South Asian country holds a strong appeal for many Israeli tourists.
A very large number of Israeli tourists flock to India at this point of time, particularly in the southwestern region of India, namely Goa, beaches of Goa, Mumbai, Cochin, and some Pune, etc. And lone wolf attacks at this point of time are very much on the card, keeping in mind that the ISIS is almost on the last legs.
Israeli counter-terror experts are recommending that any visitors already in India avoid markets, festivals, and crowded shopping areas. They're also advising all Israeli families with relatives in India to immediately establish contact with their loved ones and inform them of the threat. Back in Berlin, just 2 weeks after the truck ramming attack in a crowded Christmas market, the husband of Israeli victim Dalia Eliakim has woken up. Aaron, what's the update?
Well, Rami Eliakim was put under heavy sedation and life support systems. And he's just now, started to breathe on his own, so he's waking up and he's starting to speak. And we just, in the wake of this tragedy, we just wish him and his family a speedy recovery.
Absolutely.
Back in Berlin, just 2 weeks after the truck ramming attack in a crowded Christmas market, the husband of Israeli victim Dalia Eliakim has woken up. Dalia was one of 12 people killed in the terror attack perpetrated by Tunisian national Anis Amri, who was killed days later in a shootout in Italy. Dalia's husband Rami was one of the dozens injured and until today was unconscious. According to Rami's sister, Rami began breathing on his own this morning, so sedatives were slowly lowered and he is now awake. He has yet to be told, however, of Dalia's death. In a surprising turn, it seems like the second blow to the Eliakim family comes from Israel, where they've been denied status as victims of terror. Gaining the title from the state would grant certain benefits and compensation from the Israeli tax authority and Social Security. The Defense Ministry explains, however, that the Eliakims were not targeted for being Israeli and therefore do not qualify under the Victims of Terror law.
It certainly is a relief to hear that Rami Eliakim is doing so much better. But many Israelis are happy to say goodbye to 2016 following a wave of terror during which they were frequently the victims of Arab terror attacks. And the year didn't close quietly, but instead with a series of violent incidents characterizing the last 12 months.
Within the past 24 hours, a Palestinian man confessed to intending to stab Jews after being caught in the northern West Bank with a knife. Another Arab captured in Hebron with weapon parts also admits to having planned an imminent attack. 3 more Palestinians have been arrested on suspicion they shot at an army position in the northern West Bank just at the start of the Sabbath, although no one was injured. Earlier on Friday, a Palestinian woman was shot and lightly injured while she was trying to stab Israeli soldiers at a checkpoint outside of Jerusalem. Security forces were able to stop the knife-wielding assailant by aiming at her legs after she ignored multiple orders to halt. Meanwhile, IDF troops came under attack by 3 West Bank settlers who were clashing with Palestinians near a village south of Hebron. The soldiers were trying to evict the settlers from a site of suspected hate crime-related vandalism at the time. The 3 were arrested, and police have opened an investigation into the so-called price tag attack, which are generally carried out by extremist Jews against Arabs in protest of government policy they oppose.
Well, there may be something to celebrate about here in Israel. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump started the new year off by making it clear that 2017 is going to be a very good year for American-Israeli relations. Let's hear more from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Just ahead of the holiday, the incoming president took time to reiterate his views and did so while standing alongside boxing promoter Don King.
I think you know what I believe. I'm very, very strong on Israel.
And then, on New Year's Eve, the Republican leader specifically criticized last week's speech by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry against Israeli building practices, after being asked if he believes President Barack Obama may be trying to undermine his incoming administration with last-minute maneuvers.
Well, I spoke to him yesterday. He's been very nice on the phone. We have a very good relationship. Look, we have to protect Israel. Israel, to me, is very, very important. We have to protect Israel. And I disagree with what he's done on Israel. I listened to Secretary Kerry's speech. I think it's very unfair to Israel what happened.
As he was wrapping up his brief holiday comments, Trump surprised almost no one by stating his 2017 New Year's resolution is to make America great again. And he clearly believes that building even stronger ties between the United States and its strongest ally, Israel, is part of that plan. It seems that Trump wants to demonstrate his friendship with Israel on day one by inviting Prime Minister Netanyahu to his inauguration. According to sources in the Prime Minister's office, they have been contacted by the Trump staff, which is aggressively pursuing Netanyahu to attend the inauguration, and Netanyahu is considering the offer. According to the New York Post, Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is leading the call to persuade Netanyahu to hold talks with Trump before the swearing in. Trump has been supporting Israel against the anti-settlement resolution in the UN and against Secretary of State John Kerry's speech that was critical of Netanyahu's policies. Trump has tweeted that Israel is being treated unfairly and promised that things will be different once he takes office. This is Steve Leibowitz for ILTV.
Steve Leibowitz now joins us in the studio. Thanks for coming in, Steve.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. So the Obama administration remains critical of Israel in their final days in office, while we're seeing President-elect Donald Trump just show his support. What are we seeing Israel doing during this time?
Well, Israel's trying to figure out what it should be doing and what it should be planning for when Trump comes into office in just 20 days from now. We've had unprecedented criticism, public criticism from the Obama administration, from the speech of Obama, of Kerry, and from the UN resolution that the U.S. didn't block. At the same time, they're getting tweets of support for Trump. Just hold out a little while until I get into office. I think that that's what we're going to do. We're going to sort of lay low, try not to criticize the U.S. too much publicly in the final days of office.
Can we really expect Prime Minister Netanyahu to attend the inauguration?
Look, I think Trump is desperate for some celebrities to come. I think right now his only top celebrity that's coming to his inauguration is Sylvester Stallone. His presidency is very controversial. A lot of critics, of course, of him. There'll probably be demonstrations against his inauguration when he's there. He wants to be credible. He wants to have leaders there. I don't know if he'll have Putin there, but he certainly hopes to have Netanyahu.
Well, I guess we're going to just have to wait and see what happens. Thanks so much for coming in, Steve.
Okay.
Before today's attack in Istanbul, Israeli authorities had already been issuing travel warnings to Israelis visiting countries like Turkey and India. Joining us to discuss the security situation as well as Israeli-U.S. relations is Dr. Martin Sherman, director of the Israeli Institute for Strategic Studies. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for inviting me.
So Happy New Year. Let's begin with some of the harder news that we've been witnessing today. Dr. Sherman, what is your advice to Israelis who are planning to travel abroad right now amid all of these travel warnings that we're seeing from the Israeli government?
Well, specifically with relation to Turkey, I think my advice is steer clear. But I think I would have given that advice several years ago, given the deterioration of the relationship with Turkey since the rise of the Erdogan government, who's clearly been a very anti-Israeli has been very anti-Israeli in all his behavior and attitude. So I think it would be a good idea for Israelis to steer clear of Turkey. And I think Turkey now is basically reaping the storm that it sowed. If you remember, Erdogan started off his incumbency with a statement of no enemies. I think he's reached a stage where he's got no friends. And I think also by purging the army and the security services from so many experienced professional officers, he's left himself in a difficult position. And as you've seen now, Turkey has been plagued time and time again by terrorist attacks over the last few months, which seems to be an embarrassing display of incompetence. So I would think Turkey is probably a good place to avoid if you can't, if you've got an option.
Which is too bad because it used to be one of the top travel destinations for many Israelis here. Now, turning to U.S.-Israeli relations, a whole nother animal. President-elect Donald Trump keeps speaking out about his support for Israel, as we all know and as we heard earlier in our newscast. And he's continued to criticize the Obama administration. What should Israel be doing in this final week until President Trump finally takes office?
Well, I think Israel should hold fast. I think we were given a very lucky respite by not having Hillary Clinton elected. You know, the Trump administration and its attitude towards the Middle East is still shrouded in a lot of uncertainty. But if Hillary had been elected, there would have been no uncertainty, which is why it was a good idea that she wasn't elected. So I think up until Trump is elected, Israel should hold fast. And after that, I think we should embark on an assertive change of policy towards the Middle East, particularly the Palestinian issue, and expose it for the hoax that it really is. You know, people have, last week, the settlements were castigated for being the major obstacle to peace. And this is, of course, absurd, because Arab enmity towards Israel predates the settlements and postdates the settlements, at least in Gaza, where every vestige of Jewish presence was razed to the ground and didn't bring us any peace. So I think Israel needs to adopt a far more assertive view, and given the seemingly supportive administration of Trump, I think it would be a good opportunity to begin to navigate a drastically different course than the course we've taken up to now.
Now, the Trump staff is apparently urging Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to attend the presidential inauguration on January 20th. Do you believe that is a wise move diplomatically?
Well, I really haven't heard much discussion of the pros and cons. My instinct is, yes, go for it. I think that this would cement the relationship and send a strong message to many of Israeli detractors that there's a new sheriff in town.
Okay. Now, Trump has often said that many changes will come on day one of his presidency. What can we expect, in your opinion, come January 21st? Well,
I think we should be careful about too rosy expectations, because with all the goodwill that Trump and his entourage may have towards Israel, they have a very strong bureaucracy which has a fixed agenda, which has not always been pro-Israel. So I think we should tone down our expectations, but be cautiously optimistic.
All right, well, thank you so much for coming in, Dr. Sherman, and hopefully we'll have you back in.
Thank you very much for having me.
Imagine having the chance to meet a living creature from the biblical times. Well, it turns out there actually may be a way, because a flock of holy sheep have just made it back to the Holy Land, and I got the chance to meet them firsthand.
The other night I wanted to make a bonfire, so we have a special fire pit, and I found a couple of bushes, and so I wanted to start the fire with these bushes on the wood. And when I came back to light it, the bushes were gone. They ate it. So I said, "Oh, who's the Moses who ate my burning bushes?"
Who's eating the burning bush?
You may have never heard of them, but the sheep behind me are a pretty big deal across borders. They're called Jacob's sheep, and their lineage traces back to biblical times. The sacred flock appears in the book of Genesis in the Old Testament, where they were given to Jacob by his father-in-law as wages. Their wool was even used to make Joseph's famous multicolored coat.
These sheep are the only breed in the world that have the description of the Bible on them. They have the spots and speckles, and ankle bands, and in the prophet Ezekiel, horns of the original biblical sheep. Some studies have shown that they are a very old world breed of sheep that did come from the Middle East about 4,000 years ago.
Meet Gil and Jenna Lewinsky. This Israeli-South African couple have spent the last 2 years of their life on a special mission to bring the Jacob sheep back to the Holy Land from Canada, where they've been most recently living. The Lewinskys rescued the sheep after they were almost thrown out of a heritage farm, after realizing how very special their background was.
Why would the Bible have a full chapter in Genesis dedicated to how Jacob got his flock and his description and everything? They don't have a purpose. Obviously they have a purpose.
They even claim that Jacob's sheep are similar to the Jewish people.
And also there is a curious, I don't think it's a coincidence, but they're the only other major mammal to have Tay-Sachs disease, which is a disease that affects Ashkenazi Jewry.
No matter how similar they may be, it certainly hasn't been an easy process to bring the Jacob sheep over to the Jewish state. For the last 2 years, the Lewinskys have been engaged in a series of high-level negotiations with the Israeli and Canadian foreign ministries to bring the flock over to Israel.
They're sort of like the national animal, the sheep. So that's something we'd like to re-establish in Israel. We want the sheep to have conservation status, so that they won't be used for milk or meat, and that they just be growing in their number, because worldwide it's a fact that they are endangered. I think this would be something nice that Israel should be known for, conserving animals.
Well, after a hard fight, the determined couple has finally had success, and the sheep are back in Israel, or should we say back? So it looks like the sheep need a little bit of bribing for a one-on-one interview, so I have some handy grain, and we're gonna see if we get anybody to bite. So you guys think you're gonna stick it out here in the Holy Land? No? It's a mannequin challenge, no response, but I think that looks like somewhat of a yes.
Come here, David.
I feel like we're gonna need another. The dogs want to be in the shots all the time. So what do you think about? What do you think about the Holy Land, huh?
He loves it. He wants to kiss you.
Success! Finally, they love me just as much as I love them. The sheep seem to be content, but the transition hasn't exactly been easy. All 117 of them are still being quarantined before they can move to their final home, and conditions aren't perfect to say the least. Quarters are cramped, and right now the sheep have spent the past couple of weeks at a farm just a few kilometers from the Gaza border, which doesn't always feel safe.
There's always armed cobras passing like this?
Something happened, huh?
But the Lewinskys seem like they can take on anything. The couple both had flourishing careers before they decided to dedicate their lives to shepherding the sheep. Gil was a journalist and Jenna worked for the Israeli Foreign Ministry. But they say the transition wasn't as hard as some might think.
But when you transition to farming, a certain joy deep in your heart comes out of it. Everything seems to connect. Shepherding is a real way of life. You know, it actually parallels this in the Tanakh, that the good leaders are good shepherds, right?
They're right. Both former President Shimon Peres and former Prime Minister Ariel Sharon once worked as shepherds themselves. Coming down to visit the Jacob sheep might actually be a good crash course on how to run the world, or at least how to keep your memory sharp.
how did you come up with the names for 117 different sheep? I mean, coming up with a name for one child is hard in of itself, right?
Well, sometimes we got our inspiration from the Bible, and we also had volunteers in Canada. And the only thing we told our volunteers is they need to have Hebrew names.
So is there going to be a sheep named after me?
Is there a Hebrew version of Natasha? What does Natasha mean in Hebrew?
Yeah, there is no Hebrew version of Natasha. I guess
We'll have to make one.
Yeah, we'll have to make one, right?
So what's next for Israel's newest 117 woolly residents? They'll be heading to a farm in Nesarim, a small town near Jerusalem. Because as the Lewinskys say, there's no better place in Israel for the sheep than the mountains of Judah, where they wandered thousands of years ago. And I have a strong feeling a lot of visitors will want to come and wander there themselves with these historic creatures.
No, I'm serious when I say I'm going to be back here to visit. Made a bunch of new friends, 117 to be exact.
Israel's Central Bureau of Statistics just released initial estimates on the performance of the Israeli economy for the past year, reflecting overall good news.
The country's GDP is up to 3.8%, which reflects about a 1.8% growth per capita, when taking population growth into account. Other findings include a 4% rise in private consumption, a 3% increase in exported goods and services, and a substantial 10.8% spike in the purchase of consumer durables. Even though imports also rose by around 9.7%, the nation's balance of payments currently stands firmly in the black, with a surplus of $13.4 billion in its 2016 account.
Lots of people across the world have recently become fans of two video blogging sisters from North Carolina known by the stage names Diamond and Silk. The pair came to fame as strong supporters of President-elect Donald Trump during his presidential campaign and now have a powerful message on behalf of the Jewish state. The flamboyant YouTube personalities' real names are Lynette Hardaway and Rochelle Richardson. Their latest clip blasts outgoing U.S. President Barack Obama for failing to veto the UN resolution against settlements, and Secretary of State John Kerry for his critical address against Israel.
Hey y'all, so I'm sitting there watching my TV, minding my business the other day, getting prepared for the new year. And I know that something went down with Israel because I saw Kerry on TV talking about them. Now, I'm not quite sure as to what went down, but I do know that Kerry must be slipping in all of that Heinz ketchup. Because he tripping. Let me tell you something. Israel is our ally. So that means we have to have their backs. I don't care if their back is small and our backs are big. We still got to have their back, period. Oh, but you got Obama. You know, Obama looked like he may be out of touch. He was out of touch with this election. He was out of touch with the American people. And now he is out of touch with Israel. And if he's not careful, somebody will end up stabbing Israel in the back. And we can't let that happen. Listen, Israel is our allies. That means we are supposed to scratch each other back. Have each other back. And guess what? We stand with Israel. We will always have their back.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. 2017 has arrived, and you know what that means. It's time to make our New Year's resolutions. So today's word is achlata, meaning decision or resolution. Your achlatot or decisions can be more than hitting the gym or recycling more too. When you're really hungry and need your significant other to decide what they want already, you could kindly say, אני צריך החלטה היום בבקשה, or I need a decision today, please. Or if you're trying to get your friend to come out to meet you for a movie, you could ask, החלטת לבוא? Meaning, have you decided to come? So whatever your החלטה is, just remember to take your time making it because it's never the wrong time to make the right decision. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast.
ILTV's weather forecast is sponsored by Adopt a Savta, taking care of Israel's lonely Holocaust survivors.
Tonight should be partly cloudy with scattered showers and a low of 48 or 9 degrees Celsius. You can expect tomorrow's weather to include a chance of thunderstorms and snow in the north and mountains as the temperatures drop to a high of 59 or 15 degrees Celsius. All right, everybody, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.85 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at ILTV.tv. Thanks for watching and see you tonight.